Hello, everyone. I'm Roxanne with Seizure of the Day and brought to you by the Epilepsy Association of North Carolina. And I am here very happily with Philip Gattone from the Epilepsy Foundation for 18 years and was president for 8. And I'm going to talk to him tonight about everything else he has done. Also, it's amazing. Hey.
Hey, Roxanne.
How are
nice
you
to be with
tonight?
you. Doing great. So nice to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Yeah, we said we were going to talk a lot. We only have an hour though, but
I think we can cover a
just
lot. We can cover a lot of ground in an hour.
oh great. First, just talk to us about what brought you in to helping a lot with epilepsy,
Sure. Well,
if you don't mind.
oh, you bet. You bet. And everything started for our family way back in 1991. Our son, Philip, was born in 1986. We had another son after Philip, and we had Michael, and we had Jonathan. And since then, we've had Becky as well. But we had 3 boys, and Philip was just short of 5 years old. And way back in 1991, our son, Philip, was born in 1986. And we went to a an event. We came home. Philip went to sleep, and we found him very early in the morning having a seizure. He had fallen out of bed. He was having a seizure. We didn't know what had happened. We thought he actually had died because his lips were blue, his eyes were open. His eyes were deviating to the right, and we thought we lost him. We called the paramedics, and they came right away, and they said, "Oh, he's having a seizure." And so they took him to the emergency room, and he had respiratory arrest. And then he was in a coma for many days, and then he came out of the coma, and the neurologist said he just had a real bad seizure, and he may have some challenges, but this may be the only seizure he ever has. And so we went home and just prayed that that would be the only seizure he would have. But unfortunately, Philip went on to have thousands of seizures in his life. And we started down the road of taking care of him and trying to figure out how to help. And he started down the road of, as people do with epilepsy, of being very brave. And he was only 4 when he started, and he went through so many different medications and therapies. And he's had 2 brain surgeries for his seizures and lots of different treatments. And through it all, he's now an adult. But through it all, we learned so much, and we didn't really know anything about epilepsy. This was kind of pre-internet, so we didn't really have a lot of access to things. And so, we ended up really learning quite a bit, and we really understood that there were so many people out there who care deeply, who were passionately involved in supporting people with epilepsy and caring for people with epilepsy. And we ended up going to a support group very much like the one that the Epilepsy Association has, and the one that you run. And I think you have groups for parents on Thursdays as well, on occasion. And we went to that kind of a group. We were parents, and we went there, and we learned at that group that there's such a thing called an epilepsy center. And we didn't really understand what that was up until that point. So we got Philip into an epilepsy center, and there are more than 100 epilepsy centers around the country, several right here in North Carolina, but several around the country. And so we were able to get Philip connected to good care fairly early on. And as a result of the therapies that he endured and went through, and all the side effects and the different things that he experienced, his seizures began to come under better control. But it took a long time. Certain days he would have so many seizures, it was like every few minutes. But that's what got us involved. And we were kind of thrust into it as volunteers. And then we ended up volunteering at different epilepsy groups. And one of those groups was the Epilepsy Foundation. And I ended up working there. And then I was asked to serve as CEO and did that. And so, learned a lot through that process.
I hate to say this, but I'm glad you mentioned having that many a day, because when I tell people I know someone who has 300 a day, they just look at me so weird, like, you're lying, or and it I don't want it to make me feel stupid, but no, I know somebody who's like that. So now they can see this where you talked about your son having a
Sure. I mean, you
hundred
get
or
so
so.
many, because I think people think of, there's only one kind of seizure. They think that there's only one type of seizure where
Mhm,
you may lose consciousness, you fall to the ground, your muscles stiffen, and then there's movement. But there are so many different types of seizures, and some are very short and maybe only last 5 to 15 seconds. But that can interrupt your concentration, can interrupt your consciousness, and then you're back. And then 3 minutes later, you have another one of those. And you might have a cluster of those kinds of seizures. And
mhm,
so that's where you run into so many in a given time. And so Philip experienced that. And as parents, we were really struggling, but we found help through a great friend who later became a very dear friend of ours, Debbie Flater, who was so kind, and as another parent who was just running the support group and helping people. It was a very small group, maybe 10, 12 people. And that was invaluable to us. It was so helpful to us and made such a difference. And I just want to say to all of the people, in your organization, Tony and Carolyn and you and all the people who are volunteering, Bill Graham, who's organizing all this tonight, all the technology, and
yeah,
he's a master of that. But I feel like everybody who is contributing, who's helping, they make such a difference for families. You never really know how much of a difference you make, but I don't care if you're in Seattle or Miami or in Greensboro or in New York, wherever you are, the help you're providing really means something to families, because when you
mhm,
first start out on this journey, you don't really know much, and you're trying to learn what is causing this for myself or for someone I love, and what is the right next step to make. And it always helps when you can talk to somebody who
yeah,
has been there and who has understood and can help
exactly.
support you. So I just
That's
want to
so
say thank
true.
you. I want to say thank you to you, Roxanne, and to your team, and to everybody out there who's really serving so selflessly. Thank you. When you can talk to somebody who has been there
Well,
and who has
that
understood and can
that's
help.
thank you. That means a lot, because um I just want to spread the word and explain that it could happen to anyone and anything they do. So we just all, I mean, um, eh, people even need to, I tell people that even 30% of autistic children have this, but they never mention it. And they're like, really? I said, yeah. So you need to know something. If you know an autistic child, you can tell their parents, look for this or that, anything that could look like a seizure, they might need to know.
Sure, children with
So,
autism, you're right about that. This, according to the CDC, about a third of children with autism also have epilepsy. And
mhm,
people who have developmental disabilities, significant developmental disabilities, have epilepsy. Really, more than half of that population of people has epilepsy. And oftentimes when you talk to parents of children who have other conditions, they do say that seizures are really the most challenging part of the experience. And so I feel like there's a lot that people can be helped, even if it's not primary epilepsy. If it's something else and you have epilepsy along with it, there's still hope that you
mhm,
can control the seizures. uh, and so for us, I started down this road of serving as an
mhm.
advocate. And my wife went on to become a nurse. She went back to school. She had her master's degree
Oh,
in education, and she went back to become a nurse. And Jill, my wife, ended up becoming an epilepsy nurse in the same epilepsy center that saved our son's life. And so I'm so impressed by people who go into this profession as a healthcare worker, whether you're a nurse or a doctor or an EEG technician or a diagnostician, I feel like, they have changed and saved so many lives. And Philip is an example of that. When we were at our lowest point, when we were trying to figure out what can we do, we've tried so many medications, we've tried so many different therapies, what can we do? It was the Epilepsy Center that came up with a new therapy, and for us, it was Dr. Michael Smith out at Rush Epilepsy Center. But for every individual in America, there's a doctor out there who has dedicated their lives to helping and serving. And in my role at the Epilepsy Foundation, I had the privilege of working alongside as a layperson, as a non-medical person, to have the privilege of seeing the work that's being done and the researchers that are every day going to try to figure out a new cure or treatment for people with epilepsy. And it's really rewarding when you get to see the selfless work that people are doing every day. So it's a real pleasure for me. It was a privilege of my professional career to serve as an epilepsy advocate.
That sounds where I would love to be doing that much too, because I saw people that might not know that everything you've done, you've been in PubMed articles, you have won money with the Shark Tank. Was something you'd come up, well, not you won money, you had, so you
We gave the money,
sent
yeah.
it for,
We developed a
yeah,
Shark Tank for
you
epilepsy.
gave it for the
That's right.
for
We
the
gave it
research.
You bet, you bet. And there's some incredible ideas out there. And we at the Epilepsy Foundation, collaboration with the Epilepsy Therapy Project, which was an organization that was started by Warren Lammert in honor of his daughter, Sylvie. And Warren and his team did amazing work. And we, as two fathers, we decided to come together, and we merged our organizations together and became much stronger and much more effective because we came together. And we we combined our website, we combined our resources, and Warren was the organization, the Epilepsy Therapy Project had started the Shark Tank, but it was very limited. And so by merging, we were able to really expand it. And we came up with some amazing ideas. In fact, one of the ideas, Zito is a company that makes an EEG cap that, how, and I know as a person with epilepsy, and everybody who has epilepsy understands that's a real unfortunate part of having seizures, is having those tests where they have to glue the things onto the scalp, and then they have to test, and they have to take them off, and it's very uncomfortable, and children hate it. But they presented at the Shark Tank this idea that we could do a dry EEG cap that doesn't require all of that mess. And we funded it, and it's now been moving forward into epilepsy centers. And that's one example of trying to make things better. And there are some really wonderful, innovative ideas out there. And Shark Tank was one of those things that we worked on. We were able to launched several institutes. We started the SUDEP Institute because sudden, unexpected, unexplained death in epilepsy is the ultimate consequence of having epilepsy. And oftentimes people would discover their loved one who has died of a seizure, and they would go to the doctor, and the doctor would say, yes, that is a rare occurrence, but it can happen. And the people can be so angry, and understandably so, because if nobody tells you that you could be at risk of dying from seizures, then you really don't have any way to address it. And so we developed the SUDEP Institute in collaboration with CURE, with the Danny Did Foundation, with the Epilepsy Foundation, with others, and we developed this collaborative way to address education and awareness of very important issues like SUDEP. So it's those kinds of things that I'm so proud of. We developed the Wellness Institute. We developed the Innovation Institute, where all these new therapies came forward. And so that kind of experience, it really taught me that nobody can do it by themselves. It takes a team of people. And the team that you've developed at the Epilepsy Association, the team that other advocacy organizations have developed, that is the real answer to me to the challenge of how do you get things done? How do you actually make an impact and save lives and change lives for the better? And to me, what I've learned over the 20 years of working in this cause is it really takes teamwork and partnership to get the impact made.
Yeah, because I didn't know anything about SUDEP until I talked to another person. And I'm like, well, why didn't my doctor tell me about it? Because I didn't know anything. And so it's like you hear more word of mouth. That's no saying word of mouth, but I mean, just being able to get together in groups and discuss new things like this. And I laughed when you said the new cap, because I'm like, look at all this. And they probably, all the women or men that put it on the wires are just, okay, whose turn is it for somebody like this? Or they roll their eyes. Because
Yeah, they see your hair and they go, oh boy, there's some thick hair. I don't know. That's a nice head of hair. I don't know if I can get through that. But yeah, I understand. But this makes it,
that's
these
why.
types of innovations are really coming forward. And it's not only in the diagnostic side, but it's in the new therapy side. I feel like there are some of the most exciting new therapies coming forward now that I couldn't even have imagined when our son was diagnosed with epilepsy. Today, back then it was a big deal to even understand which side of the brain the seizures were coming from. Now they can, with pinpoint accuracy and genetic testing, they can figure out more and more. And so now there are therapies that can help target specific epilepsies with specific medications in a way that has never been done. And so, bioscience companies, pharmaceutical companies, these companies have dedicated millions and millions of dollars to try to figure out how they can address rare epilepsies, specific types of epilepsy, your specific type of epilepsy, and find a solution for you, specifically for you as an individual. And to me, that's the most exciting thing, to get personalized medicine and driving that forward. It's quite an ordeal, quite an expense for companies. And I'm so thankful that the companies have invested in that way. And I think it's really beginning to pay dividends now with very specific genetic epilepsies. And the more testing that can be done, there's a company called Invitae that is providing genetic testing for people with epilepsy. And regardless of your ability to pay, they can help you get that panel, that genetic panel, and then you can know more about your type of epilepsy. And then there may be a therapy that is targeted specifically for your type of epilepsy. So there's a lot of hope on the horizon. In addition to that, there are device companies now that are so incredible that have now been FDA approved to help stop seizures even before you feel the seizure coming. So a company like NeuroPace has an implant that goes on the scalp. And then there are two leads that go into the brain, the thalamus, and when it detects your seizure, your activity, your brain activity, and when it detects seizure activity, it sends a signal and disrupts the seizure, stops it before you even know a seizure starting. I mean, that's so space age, and yet it's happening right now today. And so now it's really a matter of getting people access to those therapies. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to get to an epilepsy center. They have all the resources and all the access to those kinds of therapies that can really help. So my advice to anybody who might be having recurring seizures that haven't been well controlled, my advice would be, get to an epilepsy center. And Roxanne, you can help them find an epilepsy center in North Carolina. There are plenty of places that can help a person find a place near them that has
closest
all of the tools necessary to help.
You mentioned you remember the doctor who told you what kind you had. Well, the doctor I went with my mom, and so she could tell him more history. And um, he said, "Oh, you have left mesial temporal sclerosis." I'm like, "Okay." They're not juvenile then. Um, so he said, "Just go have an MRI and tell them to do this extra view and this extra view." And oh gosh, these things. I'm sorry, y'all.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. But it's amazing while you're getting your earpiece in, I can tell you, I agree with that. I found the same thing to be true, in our case, that just having that other person there in the meeting with the doctor can be so helpful, because if you have epilepsy and you're having the seizure, you may not be able to
Yeah,
describe what's happening while you have your seizure. And somebody like a caregiver
right,
or somebody who is with you may be able to describe that to the doctor in a way that you can't. And so, Dr. Christy Heck out of USC, the Keck School of Medicine, she directs their epilepsy center there out in California. And she mentioned that as you prepare to go see an epilepsy specialist, bring someone with you who has seen you have a seizure, so they can describe that, because as you just mentioned, Roxanne,
right,
it can really be helpful to the doctor to help as part of that diagnostic treatment, to say, oh, that helps me understand what kind of seizures you have, because different behaviors in our body come from different parts of the brain. So
right.
if your right arm is moving when you have a seizure, that can help the doctor understand, okay, I think I might know where that might be in the brain. So
Mhm.
there's lots of different ways to help the doctor make the right diagnosis, and having somebody with you, as you mentioned, is a great tool.
Yeah, he's in Greensboro, so we have a lot of good neurologists here in North Carolina. We're lucky.
So lucky. And I mean, we're really blessed here in North Carolina, having lived here now for almost 5 years. I can tell you that my wife Jill and I have been so impressed with the level of care and expertise, throughout the state. And I think that's becoming more and more the case in every state. I feel like in just about every state in the country now, there are level 4 epilepsy centers or close by, where you can actually get, if you need it, you can get that expert care. Most people who can get on one medicine and their seizures come under control, God bless them. That's a great thing, and they don't necessarily need to get to an epilepsy center. But for those people who have recurring seizures, and seizures are refractory, they're not stopping no matter what they try.
Mhm.
After two tries, it's time to get to an epilepsy center and get the care you need, because they have resources there that may not be available at other places.
Right. Right. Um, and now you have also explained with that little pill or what the gel is. The gel, I mean, that was something new to me when I
Um,
looked. Are they
well,
doing anything extra with it?
I'm not sure what you're referring to, but I think, as a therapy.
Yes. Well, right. To know if that medicine or when to send more of the medicine or if it was getting enough to the
Oh,
brain.
oh, I see. Well, I think that there are several things that are happening right now that are vastly improved from where they were even a decade ago. And right now, there are several therapies that are in place right now for people who have questions, and they're not quite sure where the seizures are coming from. They have
Mhm.
they call them multimodality diagnostics. So they can take an EEG, an MRI, a metabolic test like a PET scan or a SPECT scan, and they can combine all of those together to get almost like a 3D image of the brain. And
Right.
based on that, they can identify exactly where the seizures are coming from. And for me, that was the biggest help for Philip, was getting a metabolic test that we never would have received if it wasn't for getting to an epilepsy center. And as a result of that, they were able to say, we think we know on the right side where this might be coming from. And that made Philip a surgical candidate, which really ended up helping allow him to move forward in life. And Philip was one of those children that he had developed. He was 4 years old when he started having seizures. So he had developed language. He had developed, he was walking and talking. And then as the seizures progressed, his language went away. He stopped being able to understand what we were saying. He stopped being able to say the words that he wanted to say. And as a result of the testing that we went through at an epilepsy center, they were able to understand this is where the seizures are coming from. And they did what they could in a surgical procedure, and Philip regained his language. And he went on to have an aide in the classroom from first grade all the way through 8th grade. He had a one-on-one aide helping him. And then he worked so hard, as people with epilepsy do. I've always said that people with epilepsy work twice as hard as anybody else just to get to a result that maybe other people might be able to get to without quite so much work. And I've been so impressed by how people with epilepsy persevere, and they push themselves, and they really work so hard. And Philip was one of those people. And in 8th grade, his learning disabilities that were a result of his epilepsy had started to, he started to come back into a typical way of range of learning. And so they told us in 8th grade, they said, he may not need an aide in high school. And we had fought so hard for an aide that we did not want to give up the aide.
Exactly.
We had really worked hard to advocate for him to have an aide. But we looked at each other and we said, if the school is saying that he's coming back into a typical range, our goal was to help him live independently. And so we said, let's take the risk. He still had a 504 plan, which allowed him extra time on tests if he needed it, gave him some accommodations, but the aide was gone in high school. And he ended up graduating high school on a typical curriculum. He ended up going to college. He graduated from college with a degree in computer engineering, missing 12 centimeters of the right side of his brain, which, I always say that tells me that computer experts must be left brain, because Philip's missing 12 centimeters of the right side. And he ended up getting a job. He's married. He and his wife are expecting their first baby. He's a black belt in Hapkido, a martial art. He's done amazingly well. And he is what you hope for in a situation where you have difficult to control epilepsy and you have a positive outcome. And so we're so proud of him. And at the same time, we recognize that there are other families, Roxanne, who have done everything that we've done. They've gone through all of the processes to help their child, and yet their child still struggles with very difficult to control epilepsy. They may have developmental disabilities. And so, I feel like everybody's epilepsy is very different. And it is such a difficult disorder to control. And so it's for those families that aren't where they want to be as an individual. Maybe you want to be seizure free. Maybe you want to be employed. Maybe you want to go to college. As a parent, you want your child to achieve and be happy in their life. And when seizures interrupt that, and seizures take that away and change your dreams, it can be devastating, and you can feel really alone. And so I feel like there are places like the Epilepsy Association that can help people in that situation where they're struggling. They're not in that situation where, everything's fine now, everything's great, and they're really hurting. And so there are places online. There are places here in North Carolina through the Epilepsy Association and other places around the country and around the world, quite frankly. I've had a chance to really serve globally, and I can tell a little bit about that. But in the U.S., there are places where you can go so that you don't feel alone, and there are people who can help you when you're struggling emotionally, when you're struggling spiritually, when you're struggling physically. There's always somebody there to help, and that's why I'm doubly thankful for the work that you do. That you just really don't want it for yourself. You want it for other people. You want to help others, and you and Tony and Carolyn and the whole team are helping other people, and you're to be commended for that. And I just want to thank you not only as an advocate, but also as a father. Thank you.
Yeah. Tony has done a lot. He was actually one of the first people to get a vagal nerve stimulator
Yes.
to prove that it could work. So after his, I don't even know how long he's had them. But now I've got one because of him. So that helps me because of what he had to do, having as many as he was in a day. And he went through a lot too.
Yes.
Because of the ADA not being in an act or in law. Before he had his, he didn't get anything for losing his job.
Right. I
when he
watched
started having
the video
his.
where he explained his story. He told his story, and it was so moving to understand what he has been through. And there's a gentleman who I know well. He's a dear friend. His name is Tony Coelho. And Tony was a gentleman with epilepsy. He ended up being a congressman out of California. And Tony
yes.
is the chief author of the ADA, of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And Tony helped write that really for people with epilepsy. As a man with epilepsy, he wanted to write it for people with epilepsy, and he included all disabilities, but his whole purpose was to write it for people with epilepsy. And guess what happened? After it passed in 1990, a person would have epilepsy, have a seizure in their office, they would get fired, and then they would file a complaint under the ADA, and the courts would not support the person with epilepsy. And Tony said, wait a minute, I wrote this law to help people with epilepsy. Why are the courts siding with businesses and not with people with epilepsy? And he learned that the reason was that the courts were saying that epilepsy is something called episodic, which means they were saying when you have a seizure, you have a disability, but when you're not having the seizure, you don't have a disability. And Tony was livid. He was like, no, that is not what epilepsy is. Epilepsy is not just the seizures. Epilepsy is so much more than the seizures. And so he went back with Sandy Finucane, another great advocate. And he and Sandy worked with the business community and with the medical community and with the advocacy community and got the Americans with Disabilities Amendments Act passed. So they changed it around and it passed. And so now that problem has been removed. So if people are getting discriminated against because of their epilepsy, they have a path really because of advocates with epilepsy. And so, sometimes you think it's just me. I only have one voice. I'm not really going to make a difference. The truth is that you can make a difference. I can't tell you the number of people I met. Lindsay Crunk is a young lady in Kentucky who has epilepsy, and she and her mom, Cindy, came forward along with Debbie McGrath at the Epilepsy Foundation of Kentuckiana, and they got Lindsay's law, this Schools Act, the Epilepsy Seizure Smart Schools Act passed in Kentucky. And Sam's Law and all these other different laws that have come forward have been done by individuals who have said, I'm going to stand up and fight for somebody I love, and I'm going to get this done. And I am so impressed with people like Lindsay people, in Texas, people in North Carolina, people all across the country who are standing up and saying, my voice matters. I can actually change things. And when you stand up, what you're going to find is that there are other people like you who want to stand up too. So I applaud everybody who is in the advocacy game, like you, and like the work that Tony has done. And it can be something legislative, but it can also be something as powerful as raising awareness, like you all did, getting some of these buildings, some of these major buildings, to turn purple for Epilepsy Awareness Month, and the declarations that are coming forward. That awareness actually helps significantly, because then it sets the table for some other change that can come down the road. So the work you're doing to get people to light up those buildings, to turn things purple, all the efforts that are being made, all play a key role in advancing, the agenda to say we need to make life better for people with epilepsy.
I would love to shake Tony I cannot pronounce his name.
Coelho.
Coelho. Okay. Coelho. I would love to shake his hand and say thank you, because I had to use that act with not being able to take call. And then with not being, I took the job working weekends, and then they told me I had to fill in for people that might have called in overnight or anything, but that wasn't in the job description. So I got discriminated against because I wasn't driving, and I couldn't take call or get lack of sleep with mine.
Sure.
So
sleep is a huge precipitating factor for epilepsy. If you don't get enough sleep, there are some precipitating factors, stress, lack of sleep, those kinds of things. And what you're just describing is a key one for sure. So you were able to rely on the ADA to help get through that. Wow.
I was that. So definitely would love to shake his hand, or just maybe if you could get him to tell him, if you talk to him, Roxanne says thank you.
I will tell him.
Because
it'll make his whole day. I know it. It'll make his whole day. He's that type of person. In fact, epilepsy, I've heard him speak on so many occasions, and he says repeatedly that epilepsy is his ministry. He actually was, in line to become a priest, and they wouldn't let him.
Oh, really?
Because they were saying, back when he was younger, they were saying, you can't have epilepsy and be a priest. And so he was not allowed in the priesthood. But he had since met the Pope and talked to the Pope about it. And later on, they changed the rule. And Tony, he doesn't know if it was him or not, but it was kind of a nice coincidence that he talked to the Pope, and then later on it changed. But Tony, it will make his whole day, because all he cares about is helping people with epilepsy, people with disabilities. That's his whole life. And so he'll be thrilled that someone recognized his efforts.
Oh, yes. That's why I had a big grin when you said his name. I knew who that was. Oh, yes.
I will tell you, there are so many great people, these leaders who have really made some big, big strides. But I do want to tell you that just because you may not be able to create an ADA, you might not be able to create this big piece of federal legislation. There are things that we can do in our own world to advocate and make a difference for other people. So I want to encourage everybody to get involved and believe that you can make a difference, because you can. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen from the most, what people would say are, unremarkable people who are just typical people, salt of the earth people, you and me, just anybody can make a difference. It just, if you really commit yourself. The problem is that oftentimes the people who want to help the most are people who have epilepsy or who have a loved one with epilepsy, and their time is taken because they are occupied by the experiences and the challenges that epilepsy brings. So, it's sleepless nights, it's constant decision making. Should we try this medicine? Should we try that medicine? It's advocating for your loved one with the school district or with yourself at an employer.
Yeah.
Your life can be turned upside down with epilepsy, and so oftentimes you don't have the time to give, to advocate. And so I understand that when people don't have that time because epilepsy has played such an important role and it's demanding their attention. But there will come a time when it may not be as busy for you. And when that time comes, remember that you can make a difference. And that would be a good time to get involved because we need you. You know, the whole epilepsy
Yeah.
community needs you. And so the more people that get involved, I think with the Epilepsy Association, with other organizations across the country, the more impact we're going to have as a community.
Yes, that's so true. And it's great. In Davidson County, the school board there decided itself to vote that teachers had to know how seizure first aid, and we call ours Sam's Law too.
Sure.
And they have their teachers learn, and then they have it's great. And then they have a way of transportation. They have transportation aid that doesn't charge the people with epilepsy. It's great. Yeah. So
they should be really proud of
maybe
them. I'm so thankful. That they should hold that up as a banner. That is terrific. They're set themselves apart. They're prepared. You know, should a student have a seizure, they know what to do. And that is just wonderful to hear. And I hope that can be a model for other school districts, state. And ultimately, wouldn't it be great if you and I and others can work together and get this state to pass Sam's Law here to make sure that we can get some education in the schools and mandated so that every teacher and every school knows what to do.
Yeah, and we have some congressmen that are helping us, but we still need to teach the others that it is needed to know what epilepsy is, I guess.
That's right.
So,
I think if they did understand what the impact that epilepsy has on a family, if they really understood that the teachers themselves and the school administrators want this, they want to be prepared. Teachers are so wonderful. Educators are amazing. They're so spectacular. And all they want is to know what to do so that they can address it if it comes up in their class. You know, I feel like that's something that I know the teachers that know more about what to do have less anxiety in the classroom. They have more confidence in their teaching. They feel better about, having a plan so that they can address something that's needed. And same thing with school nurses and same thing with students, quite frankly. The more that the students know, the better. And so I'm thankful that we developed some things over the years at the Epilepsy Foundation, and they've been kind of open source, so anybody can use them. There's no cost for it. It's just really, it's there. And so now I'm not there anymore, but when I was there, we really tried to get education out to as many school nurses and school teachers as possible. And now I believe there is a seizure certification that you can get online for free. And I feel like that's a great next step. And I'm so proud of the team, that is working, toward that end at the foundation and in other organizations as well. They really put the very best effort forward, and now that's going to help a lot of people.
A few of us in the association want to know how we can get certified to teach others. So maybe if there's a way, if you have to be certified to teach. I'm already certified as knowing what to do and everything, and past everything, but be able to teach.
Sure.
Would be great.
I can get you in touch with somebody who can help that way. And if there are others out there that are interested, there are ways to do that. And I'll make sure so that they can reach out to you if they're interested. Sure.
That would be great, because I would love to be able to teach. Of course, people that know me or are friends with me, they already know what to do. But, I don't know if they've talked, I doubt they've talked to other people, don't have seizures or when they aren't with me.
Yeah, and
So,
the education also helps reduce the stigma of epilepsy and the misunderstanding of
mhm,
what seizures are all about. And I experienced a real understanding of how bad the stigma can be when I was working globally at the International Bureau for Epilepsy. I served on their executive committee for 7 years, and we had representatives from Asia, from South America, from Europe, from every corner of the globe, who would come together and try to address key issues that affect all of us around the world. And I heard stories and saw with my own two eyes some of the horrific discrimination
right,
that's taking place for people. And we think in America how difficult it is, and believe me, it is difficult here. But in some other countries, the things that people did and still do because they have a
right.
lack of understanding of what epilepsy is really terrifying. And so I feel like when we think about the struggle that we face in trying to get people to understand, whether it's teachers or nurses, or whether it's our employers, or family members or friends,
Mhm,
we have avenues that we can get that done, and we will continue to get that done. But in other parts of the world, they look to the
yeah,
United States as a beacon of hope, because in their country, what they do is so horrifyingly bad for people with epilepsy that they can't possibly understand how they're being treated this way. There was a story, and you can look it up in the New York Times. They did an article on this. There's a woman in Sierra Leone in Africa who was part of a small tribal community, and she had epilepsy. And they brought her to the village doctor, who wasn't, a medically trained doctor, but a doctor in their neighborhood. And he, felt like this was a spiritual thing, and ended up um, having her drink this liquid, this kerosene.
oh, yeah,
She was supposed to drink 2 liters of kerosene to burn out the evil from the epilepsy, and she ended up passing out from it. She lived, and she ended up, you know, uh, telling her story, and now she is a teacher for people with epilepsy. She's helping to advocate for people with epilepsy. She's come all the way through this, but to think that
mhm,
someone would do something like that. And people don't understand. In China, for example, I met a wonderful lady who is a researcher out of China, and she said in certain cities, they have some pretty good education, but in many parts of their country, in the more rural parts of the country, there's very
mhm,
little education. And so people really suffer quite a bit. So globally, epilepsy has been a major condition that has been misunderstood. And so the United States and the work you're doing in North Carolina, the work that's being done across the country, can serve as an example to other countries on how to help somebody with epilepsy. So the work that you do, you know,
mhm.
especially with the internet now, people can
Right,
gain access to some best practices and some ideas. And as the Epilepsy Association continues to grow, I would be honored I could pair you up with the buddy country, to other organizations in Europe and other places that you guys can compare notes as to what works for you all and what works for them. And I feel like that kind of collaboration can be helpful on both ends.
I actually talked to a doctor in Africa, and he showed me how happy and thrilled he was to get this EEG machine, and, oh, that thing was so old,
Yeah.
but, oh, he was so thrilled on how he could do EEGs now on patients that I was just happy for him and ecstatic because he finally had something to work with. And you hear about things, and I know the name Sierra Lamone too.
That's amazing.
Heard
And
it.
and so we do what we can. I mean, I feel like the stigma exists everywhere, but I feel like in North Carolina, and people who are listening to this, if you feel bullied, if you feel like you are not getting treated fairly, you can reach out to Roxanne,
Mhm.
you can reach out to me. There are ways to address this. Nobody deserves to be treated with anything but full respect. And part of it is just talking about it. The more we talk about it, the better. And Roxanne, I wanted to tell you that my latest endeavor, I launched a company with two people who are just phenomenal people. Ken Lowenberg is a digital media genius, and Greg Grumberg is an actor out of Hollywood. And
Uh-huh.
Greg, he was the first actor to really stand up and speak out about epilepsy, which affected his family, his son.
Talk,
And he was in Star Wars and
talk,
Star Trek and Heroes and Felicity and all these shows, and he stood up and said, "It's time that we talk about it." And so
talk
we're
about it. Yeah.
yeah, so we started talkabout.org, and we're getting celebrities to talk about epilepsy, and so that's the most fun I've had. And I feel like there's so many different aspects to it, but one of the things that the starting point is to talk about it, and that can lead
Uh-huh.
to changes in our lives. So I'm really thankful that I get a chance to work alongside Greg and Ken and these celebrities who are speaking out and helping people understand epilepsy. So it's not just the epilepsy community that they're talking to; they're talking to the general public to say
Mhm.
it's time we all understood more about epilepsy.
I've seen commercials on YouTube about how they have people stand up and talk about it, and all these other actors that don't even have it. I'll
Right?
I'll stand up and talk about it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so
Mhm.
I feel like people who choose to help our community who don't have epilepsy, people who say, I think this is important enough and I care enough about this to talk about it and help. I'm so grateful for them because we need them. We
Oh,
need their voices. We really need help for people who just care, who care about other people. And so I'm thankful.
yeah.
And Greg has been really driving this for a long time. And he's been speaking
Uh-huh.
out before it was ever really brought forward in the way it's been lately. He's been phenomenal. He's been a hero of mine for a long time, and to work alongside him and Ken is really a privilege. So I'll keep you posted on our progress, and maybe
Okay.
maybe Greg will give a shout out to the Epilepsy Association community as well.
Cool. Well, I have to say, well, thank you to Carolyn because she helps us and doesn't have anyone in her family
Is that right?
that has
Wow.
epilepsy. Now, one does have diabetes that causes a seizure, but not really just epilepsy. So, see, Carolyn has a heart.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah,
Thank you to Carolyn and to everybody on your team who's giving of their time and their energy. I know that as a father, we were kind of at our wits' end. We were not sure what we were going to do. We had a kind of a bad prognosis with no real answers, and it was a support group, as I
mm,
mentioned when we started, that made a difference. And so support groups, oftentimes, especially these days, people say, oh, I don't need to go to a support group. I can find my information on Google. And that's true. You can find a lot of information online. But I want to encourage people to know that the Epilepsy Association has a support group for people with epilepsy. You look to reach out to the Hispanic community, to communities of color,
yeah,
to anybody who has a need. The Epilepsy Association welcomes you. And I feel like I just want to encourage people to
thank you.
join up on these support groups because it adds a dimension to the information you receive, and the added dimension is relationships. when you get information, it's one thing to have information. It's really good to have information and accurate information, but it adds a whole nother dimension when you can build in a relationship with another person who has been through it. You develop friendships. You can lean on somebody when you need to be when you need help, and they can lean on you when they need help. And it's a much more fulfilling, rich experience when you can get into a support group and help each other. So I just want to encourage everybody to consider that, because you don't know until you really go to these kinds of things what can come of it. So I just want to say thank you, to you for doing that kind of support group, because it was something that made a huge difference for Jill, for myself, for our son. And, we believe in the power of relationships with each other, and, grassroots kind of help for each other.
Yeah, and I have, when Google had their groups, but they closed it down, I made a lot of friends online that we still get together with each other on Fridays
Isn't that amazing?
just to play a game. And some of them don't even have epilepsy, but they know what it is because of me.
Exactly, Roxanne, that's so great. And can I also share with you that my son Philip, who has epilepsy, being a computer engineer, he actually created a new website for people with epilepsy called friendswithepilepsy.com. And if you're looking, like you were talking about how Google Groups has kind of stopped it, you made friends. Friendswithepilepsy.com is a way for people to talk to each other and get the help digitally, and that might help them connect to you at the Epilepsy Association as well. So Philip did that. He wrote all the code, he did the website himself, he did everything himself. So just for people with epilepsy.
Wow.
Yeah, he's amazing. And so friendswithepilepsy.com is now available for people, and he's got over 500 users now, and it's growing fast. So it's one of those things that's up and coming, and I know he'd love to work with you. And as time goes forward,
Wonderful.
there are other opportunities. So keep that in mind as well.
One thing my job decision was not ever to do anything writing or online, anything with a website. But when I started writing, people said they could understand me. And I guess it's because I don't use these long vocabulary words, because my vocabulary stinks. My husband would always say, yeah, she'd have to go around there, make it around the tree, and come back before she gets her story told. Because I didn't use those long words, but writing, I had a few people leave comments saying, thank you. Now I understand this. And I was like, wow, maybe this was my next line of work after not being able to do what I went to school for. So
That's incredible, Roxanne, really incredible. And that's what I think what you're saying is so important, that people have different talents, and you never really know. The brain, if it's struggling in one area, it can make up for it in another. And it sounds like we were having a little trouble finding the words, but you could write it, and that came out, and really can impact people. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, people that know me, they say, okay, finish what you're saying. So yeah, I understand it. They don't laugh at me or anything like that. They just say, okay, Roxanne, we're tired of you talking.
I hear that too on my show.
And I think we're out of time now, but I really enjoyed talking with you.
That was a real
And
pleasure.
it was nice. And I'm glad you moved to North Carolina.
Thank you. I look forward to meeting you in person and continuing our work together.
That would be wonderful. I appreciate this too.
You bet.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Again, thank you for the Epilepsy Association, for Philip Gattone joining me, and for Bill with live stream helping me with all of the computer work. Like I said, that's very hard for me that he takes care of too. So everyone have a great night, and be either next Tuesday or the Tuesday after that. We'll have another show, 7:30. Thank y'all.